Welcome to the Pursuing Points podcast, where it's all about the pursuit of credit card points and miles today so that you can travel the world free of charge tomorrow. And now, your host, Peter Foti.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 16th Pursuing Points podcast. Thank you for being with me tonight. I'm your host, as always, Peter Foti. And tonight on the podcast, we are going to talk about something a little bit different. Different insofar as it's not about credit card points and miles specifically, but rather it's information that I think is relevant to anybody as far as protecting yourself online and protecting your financial well-being. And this is sort of in light of everything that's sort of happened recently. So what we're going to talk about is protecting your identity online specifically. And we're basically going to go over some of what's happened and ways that you can ensure that your identity isn't compromised. Of course, there is no, I don't think that there is like a surefire 100% way, because obviously if there was, we would all just do it and this wouldn't be a problem. But in the world that we live in, unfortunately, companies, they are breached or hacked, and your information ends up out in the ether. And of course, we don't necessarily know who has it. They may or may not ever do anything with it. But of course, especially after this big Equifax hack, I think this is sort of top of mind for everybody. So I think first we should just kind of go over how, sort of prevalent this is. I mean, this happens all the time. And it was funny because as I was sort of researching for this episode, I was doing searches on, hacks and breaches in 2017. And I, because I've only heard of a few in the news, I assume there wasn't that many, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know. But as it turns out, there's quite a few. So I have a link that I will provide in the show notes from Identity Force, but they have a list of all of the 2017 breaches and hacks, and they don't number them, so I'm not going to count them. But I mean, we're looking upwards of 20. Right. And these are big companies who chances are, one of these companies has your information, if not, most of them. Right. So these are Whole Foods and Sonic and Deloitte, Equifax, of course, Verizon, Yahoo has been a big victim, Blue Cross. So all of these companies, some of them are even universities, Washington State University, the University of Oklahoma, and the list just kind of goes on where, a hacker gets into these people's systems, compromises the data, and then exfiltrates it to their own server. And what they do with it at that point is really up, for anybody's imagination. I mean, they could sell it, they could use it themselves. The scariest outcome for an individual, of course, is that somebody finds or gets possession of, say, your social security number, address, and other bits of information, and is then able to apply for a mortgage or open up a new line of credit all in your name without you knowing. And that's sort of the horrifying outcome. So the things we're going to talk about today should help to ensure that that does not happen to you if you, of course, implement some of these things. And of course, as always, I would love to hear what else you as listeners are doing to protect yourselves online. If I missed anything or if you have any suggestions, please let me know. But I think we have a pretty good list here. And we're just going to kind of get right into it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is passwords. And I know that, I myself, I work in technology. So I've been, sort of making use of a thing called a password manager for a long time. But I have family members who don't work in technology, and they tend to reuse passwords, and those passwords may be weak because they don't have a password manager. So they're trying to come up with something simple enough so that they can remember it off the top of their head. So when it comes to passwords, the first bit of advice, and frankly, if you leave here doing nothing else, the thing that I would most like to see everybody do is start using a password manager. So what a password manager is an application where you're able to generate random passwords, and then they save them for you, so you don't ever have to remember them. And then you remember a single or a master password, and that's how you access the application. So in my case, I use an app called 1Password. And what that app allows me to do is generate random passwords for every account that I have. And then when I want to use that password, I have to tell 1Password what my master password is in order to unlock the software. I realize I just said the word password like a dozen times, so it doesn't quite roll off the tongue. But anyway, there are a bunch of different password management options available to you. I will include a link in the show notes to an article on Lifehacker, which outlines the sort of top 5. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. I've been using 1Password for 5 or 6 years, something like that. So I'm not going to switch, but it does cost money. And I know that there are, I think, decent free options available to you. But this is a huge deal. So, because what hackers will do is if they can obtain even a single password for your account, and say it's like a random account, I don't know, say a hacker obtains your Facebook password. So, you may be thinking, well, there's nothing malicious they could do to my Facebook account. Like, I don't really care. But what they'll do is they'll try that same password or minor variations, right, with different letters capitalized or different numbers. And they'll try that password with whatever email they obtained on a multitude of different accounts, right? So if your Facebook password is the same as your email, now you've lost both, right? And then in your email, if you've got emails from your bank or whomever, you can kind of set yourself up for, I don't know if destruction is the right word, but certainly you can easily have your entire online identity compromised with just a single password if you're somebody who reuses similar passwords over and over again. So what the password manager is going to do is make it so that you don't have to remember these passwords. They're going to be very complex and hard to guess for a computer. They're going to take, in some cases, many days or even years to crack. And so that's really one of the great ways to protect yourself. So, and then once you've got the password manager, you're going to want to be changing your passwords on a semi-regular basis. So, I've heard people recommend that you change them once a quarter, so 4 times a year. I personally don't do that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and it's probably what you should be doing. If you're changing them once a year or every 6 months or so, that's probably sufficient. And basically what's going to happen, and the reason you're supposed to change them is that, if someone is able to compromise, say, Yahoo, but the password that they got was your, an old password, as long as you continuously cycle through those, you should be good. Change your passwords, and then, of course, don't reuse the same password over and over again. What software like 1Password will do is actually tell you whether or not you've got duplicative passwords. And then if you do, you can go in and easily change them. Reusing passwords is kind of a mortal sin in online security for what I just said, right? It's if somebody gets that password, now they don't have just that account, they've got any other account that shares that password. And then the last thing as it pertains to passwords is to turn on 2-factor authentication. So what this is generally websites will offer this using your phone, and they'll send you a text message. And basically all it does is with 2-factor, you have to sign in using your username and password. And then the website or the app will send you a text message with a code that you also have to enter into the app before you're granted full access. So it's basically a second line of defense, and it means that even if someone obtains your password, they can't gain access to your account unless they also somehow have your phone. So it sometimes could be a pain to have to do this over and over again. For instance, I have it set up on pretty much every single website, and that means I can't really log into anything without my phone nearby. But, sort of the peace of mind that it offers you, I think is well worth the trade-off. So just in review, we want you to use a password manager, don't reuse your passwords, change your passwords on a regular basis, and turn on 2-factor authentication. And again, I'll have a link to Lifehacker and the top 5 password managers. And if you guys have any questions about that stuff, just let me know. And of course, again, if I missed anything, reach out. So the next thing that you can do that I think is super interesting and really useful, and a lot of people say this is the single best thing that you can do. This is called a credit freeze. So a credit freeze is also known as like a security freeze. And basically what it does is it places a lock on access to your credit report. And And then once the lock is in place or the freeze is in place, lenders and other companies can't view your credit report. So we talk about this a lot with regards to points and miles, right? The number of hard inquiries you have and how it affects your credit score and whether or not an issuer will give you another card if you've already got 5 or something like that. And basically what a freeze does is prohibits anyone from making a hard pull onto your credit report without you first unfreezing or thawing the report. So, this is another thing where it could be annoying, where you want to apply for a line of credit. That means you have to pick up the phone or go online and say, hey, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, I'd like to unfreeze my credit so I can apply for this new card. And then the second reason why it's kind of a pain is that it does cost money. So it costs money to freeze your credit report. It costs money to thaw it. Although those costs vary by state. So not every state is the same as far as what they charge. And I will have a bunch of links in the show notes to a few different articles that go into more depth on credit freezes, as well as the websites on TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian that you would go to if you wanted to freeze your credit. But yeah, this is definitely out there. Is like, if this isn't the most important thing, it's the second most important thing. Freezing your credit will ensure that even if someone obtains all of your information, they will not be able to take out a new line of credit in your name as long as your report is frozen. And basically what happens is you're given a PIN number, and when you want to unfreeze it, you have to input the PIN number. So anyone who has your information wouldn't be able to unfreeze it without that PIN number. And of course, that PIN number, sort of going back to our first thing, is something you could store inside of your password manager. So what's great about password managers, as sort of a quick tangent, is that you can store a lot more than just passwords. Because these pieces of software are just built for security, they're very secure. You could store passwords. You could store something like your PIN number. I have credit cards in there, social security number. Everything is in my password manager, and it's all protected by their security and by my master password. So look into the credit freeze stuff. Again, it does cost money. It could be a pain, but I think the peace of mind of just knowing that your stuff is frozen is probably well worth the cost. Third on our list is credit monitoring / alerts. So basically what I mean by this is go sign up for a free account on Credit Karma and make sure that you turn on all of the alerts. So Credit Karma has free credit monitoring built into the system, and they will basically send you an email anytime your credit report changes, or there's anytime there's activity. Basically, they will send you an email, and then you can look at that email and you could say, this looks right, I expected this, or this doesn't look right and I did not expect this, and then take action. Right? One of those things is just being able to catch these things as soon as they happen, so you can get on the phone, if your identity was compromised, and start talking with people right away to try to undo the damage as quickly as possible. So speed is definitely key, and having free credit monitoring is really helpful in that regard. The second thing is just sort of, and I think most of us in the credit card space, points and miles specifically, probably do this anyway. But for those of you who don't, review your credit card statements as often as possible. So, I'm logged into these websites basically on a daily basis, looking at my pending charges, looking at my posted charges, and just doing sort of a mental check as to like whether or not I recognize the charge. And this is something I would recommend to everybody. So, if you have a Chase card, make sure you're on chase.com, looking at your balances and your transactions on a regular basis. So for you, if that's daily or if that's monthly, whatever it is, just make sure that you're doing it. And of course, the same applies as before. If you see something that doesn't or that you don't expect, get on the phone right away. So if you see a charge that looks like it could be fraudulent, you want to call American Express or Chase or whomever as soon as possible. And they are very helpful. So if you call them and you say, I don't recognize this charge, I think my card's been stolen, they will take action. They'll get you a new card. They will block the transaction, and they will work with you. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call. Do your due diligence. Make sure that you're checking your statements on a regular basis, daily, monthly, etc. And just be on the lookout for something that doesn't look right. So the third item here kind of goes hand in hand with Credit Karma. So Credit Karma is going to give you a free credit score for Equifax and TransUnion, but not for Experian. And basically what we're going to talk about is annualcreditreport.com. And this website, even though it kind of looks like it might not be super legitimate, is actually like a government website. And you can go on there and get a free credit report from all three bureaus once a year. And this is going to be your full report. So this is exactly what a bank or a credit card issuer is going to see if you apply for a line of credit. And really, you should take advantage of this. So once a year, you should go on there and request your full report and, do your best forensic accountant dance, go through each line item and just see if anything looks strange. If it does, again, we got to just pick up the phone and call, and hopefully it doesn't. But it is free once a year. And again, I'll have that link in the show notes. But do your due diligence, put your forensic accountant hat on and go through each thing. And what you're looking for, again, I don't know if I have to explain this necessarily, but, names, addresses, social security number, accounts, loans, etc. Of course, you shouldn't see anything that you didn't sign up for, basically. So those are the big items. And then I have a couple more miscellaneous items. If you've done everything in the top three, right, you've frozen your credit, you have credit monitoring and alerts turned on, and now you're using a password manager, I would say you're, upwards of 95% good, which for most people is probably sufficient. But these other little, I think I've got, what have I got? 3, 6, about 8 tips here. These are sort of, that'll maybe get you to the rest of the way. But again, they're not necessarily 100% required. So the first thing is clean up your social login permissions. And that's maybe a little too technical, but basically what I'm talking about is whenever you go to a website and they say, do you want to log in with Facebook or do you want to log in with Twitter? And you click that button, what that means is now you've created a link between some website that you're visiting and then Twitter or Facebook or Google or whatever the account is. And that can put you at risk because if that website is compromised, right, you may be compromised somewhere else as well because everything is now sort of connected. So I have another article from Lifehacker that goes through the process of how you can revoke these permissions. And you want to stay on top of this. So every 6 months or 12 months, however often you're basically changing your passwords, the second thing you should be doing as part of, like, say, your spring cleaning is going through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything else and looking at the apps that you've granted permission for these websites to use and just say, do I still use this thing? Is this still useful in my life? And if the answer is no, you should revoke the permissions, which means that, let's say you're on, chess.com, you've granted access with Facebook, but you no longer use chess.com, just go ahead and revoke those permissions, right? Now that means you've sort of severed ties with chess.com as it pertains to your account. It doesn't mean you can't go back in the future and sign up again. It just means that for right now, chess.com no longer has access to your Facebook information. So that can be really useful. I try to do that every so often. And if you've never done it before, you'll be shocked at how many websites you've granted access to your profiles to and just completely forgotten about. So go check out that article and then go on your Facebook, go on your Twitter, go on your Instagram, and just start revoking permissions for things you don't use. And then let me know how many you ended up revoking, because I'd be interested to know. For me, it's a lot. Like the first time I did it, I think it was like 50 on Facebook and like 30 on Twitter, something like that. So that's important. The next sort of little tip is you want to make sure that you're keeping all of your software across all of your devices up to date, right? Because generally what's happening with these hackers is that they're finding exploits within software. And then they are, of course, exploiting them. So, but like in the case of some of these hacks, if people, or more specifically companies, had been updating their software, these things would have never happened. Equifax is sort of the prime example where the flaw that the hackers used to gain access to Equifax had actually been found sometime, I believe, in March. But then Equifax neglected to update their software for months afterwards. And then the hackers over the summer, I believe in around July, were able to exploit the security loophole and take the data. We can't control what the big companies do, but we can control what we do on our own computers and hardware. So, if you have an iPhone and Apple tells you they have a new operating system, you should constantly be updating. And the same for every piece of software that you have on any computer, you should always have the latest version, because that's the most likely way to ensure that you have all the latest security patches from the developers, so people won't be able to take advantage. So make sure your software is up to date. The next thing, and this is kind of a fringe thing, but it could be interesting, is to use a VPN, which is a virtual private network. TunnelBear is a good example, and I'll link to that in the show notes. Basically, a VPN is going to mask your browsing traffic. So when you go to a website right now, that website can see your IP address, which gives them information about where you are in the world geographically. And a VPN means that you can actually mask that information. So you could be physically in the United States, but your VPN says that you are in Canada, right? So this is kind of an interesting way to reduce tracking and just, reduce your footprint online. This is not something I personally do. I've done it for various things in the past, and I still have TunnelBear, but I don't do all of my browsing through it. But frankly, I'm certainly considering more and more every day switching to something like that. So look into VPNs if you've never done that before. Next, I have be wary of public Wi-Fi. So anytime you're on an unsecured Wi-Fi network, that is just open season for a hacker on your computer. A hacker could get on to that same unsecured network. They could take access or take control of your machine, or what they'll do more often is, let's say you're going to try to go to chase.com to check your balances. A hacker who's infiltrated the system could put up a fake chase.com website. So when you're entering your username and password, you think you're on chase.com, but really you've sent that information to the hacker, and then they will redirect you to chase.com. So as far as you're concerned, nothing bad has happened, but now your password's been compromised. So just be careful when you're on public Wi-Fi. Avoid it if you can. And if you're going to use it, don't use it for anything like managing your financial information or anything personally identifiable. You want to avoid that as best you can. As far as your email is concerned, if it looks like spam, it's spam. If it looks weird, don't click on the link. Do not download any attachments from anyone that you don't recognize. A lot of hacking is actually just like social engineering. People will get you to click on a link. Maybe they'll start messaging you on Skype or email, and they'll say, "Oh, look at this picture," and it looks like a picture, right? It has the .jpeg file extension, but then you click on it and download it, and all of a sudden you've installed software unbeknownst to you that gives this person access to your machine. So just be very careful clicking on links. And again, as far as email attachments go, do not download them unless you're 100% sure where it came from. Second to last item is just be wary of supplying information over the phone. I feel like this is more prevalent now than it's probably ever been. I get an incredible number of spam phone calls. I don't know why, but the other day I had one where someone called and told me that they were from Blue Cross and they needed to verify my information. I said no, and then I would call Blue Cross myself. I basically hung up immediately. But I could see how easy it would be for someone to fall for that, where, because they hit you really quick, right? They don't really give you time to think. They just say, "I'm from Blue Cross. I need to verify information." And in your mind, you're just like, well, Blue Cross, right? That's a very reputable institution. They're my healthcare, etc. I'm just going to give it to them. don't. They will never call you and just start asking you for information. So be careful with those types of phone calls. If you don't recognize the number, you can probably just not answer it. How you choose to handle it is up to you, but just be wary of supplying information over the phone. And that sort of goes back to what I was saying before. A lot of hacking is just social engineering. They're trying to talk to you and they're trying to get you to give them your information. So just have your guard up and don't. And then the last thing, and this is probably a little bit paranoid, but I shred every single piece of mail that I receive that has my name or address on it if I'm going to throw it away. So I don't really care if it's junk mail. If it has my name and address, I shred it rather than just throwing it away. And of course, this doubly applies to pre-approved credit offers or anything with even more information on it than just my name and address. I shred everything. So, how you want to handle that is up to you. But I feel like you'd rather be safe than sorry. There's no reason, someone's going through your trash, which would be a problem in and of itself, but we don't want to give them anything to go off of. So shred it. If it has your name and if it has your address, shred it. I think you'll feel a little bit better about that. And frankly, just shredding stuff I think is a lot of fun. So that's kind of what I've got. Again, reach out. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if you do anything differently. But I think sort of top to bottom here, we covered the main points. I'll have a bunch of links in the show notes for you guys to check out. Thank you for listening. And if you're not already, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And if you have time and if you feel like it and if you feel like this has been helpful, I do appreciate any reviews that people leave. I do read all of them. And for people who have been sending me emails, thank you. As always, I appreciate it. I don't necessarily always get back to them immediately, but I try to address every question either through email or on the podcast specifically. And somebody actually did reach out about this, so that was part of the reason I did this show today. So thank you.